All right, the FBI is joining a criminal investigation into how Boeing's 737 MAX jets were certified for flight. Joining us right now with more is Seth Kaplan. He's the founding editor of Airline Weekly. And Seth, it's probably not a surprise to see the FBI getting involved at this point, but the bigger question is, was it a flawed process in terms of how that certification came about? What do you think?
Yeah, Becky, that's the question. And the question was, what would have caused that flawed process? Was it something, nefarious? That's probably what the FBI here is looking into. Or was it just that a series of innocent things went wrong and nonetheless caused this tragedy? The FBI clearly relied a lot on Boeing. That's what we're learning here. Boeing, look, competes in the same talent.
Not the FBI.
Right? The FAA, sorry. Clearly relied a lot on Boeing during the process. Look, the FAA competes for talent, for engineering talent, against giant companies like Boeing, right? So part of the issue could just be a resources issue. But then here you have this giant champion of American industry, the biggest exporter, and questions about whether too much was done to help Boeing stay even with Airbus. Airbus, its giant European competitor, was ahead of Boeing in coming out with its new re-engined aircraft, the A320. Boeing wanted to catch up, and Boeing actually had some engineering challenges that were more difficult than those Airbus was facing.
Seth, let's slow down for a minute. I want to break this down for people who have not been following quite as closely. It may have not been anything nefarious even on Boeing's part. This looks like a situation where maybe, it's too soon to know on any of these issues, but the questions are being raised as to whether there were corners that were cut. The Journal last year brought up the issue of pilots not needing to be retrained on the 737 MAX, and that was a huge advantage because airlines that are buying these planes don't want to take the time and the money to retrain their entire staff how to fly a new plane. This plane was different than the ones that had gone before. As you just mentioned, the airline body changed enough that they needed to move the placement of those engines. That was not something that had happened with the Boeing competitor, but by moving those engines, they had to do other things to change the plane and the way it's flown, including adding the MCAS system, which is the automatic anti-stall system that would kick in if there was too much lift at the beginning, that it would bring the nose back down towards the ground. I think what concerned me the most this week is hearing this Reuters story that the pilots on that Ethiopia airline were flipping through the manual as the plane was bucking just after impact. That tells you, if that is true, based on the voices that they heard in the cockpit at that point, if that was the case, that it was an issue of not being trained properly. If that's the case, how would you go back through and how would you kind of ferret out what happened where?
Right, flipping through the manual on Lion Air reported also in Reuters and the New York Times that the Ethiopian pilot, perhaps hadn't been trained on the simulator since the updates. That, if anything, maybe helps Boeing's case a little bit, that, they had put out these updates, and the captain, at least on Ethiopian, these reports saying didn't get the proper training. But yeah, you're right, Becky. Boeing's pitch was, look, airlines, you can have the best of both worlds. This is a new airplane in all the right ways, more fuel efficiency, greater range, but on the other hand, just kind of drop it into your fleet. And the same pilots could fly it. We are seeing here that the plane, in important ways, seems to have flown differently than the older models, as you mentioned. Different from Airbus in the sense that Airbus just kind of lucky because of technical quirks. I mean, these airplanes were all designed, the airframes, decades earlier. Nobody was thinking about these engines, but Airbus was able to put the new engines on the old airframe without having to change too much. Boeing wasn't, and then those modifications, having to change the airframe a little bit, change the placement of the engines, partly at least led to MCAS. And look, the MCAS system was also designed to prevent something that had caused previous crashes. Pilots in a panic doing the opposite of what they should have been doing, trying to climb too soon rather than tilt the nose down, regain airspeed. But here we see that partly caused the crash. The question, clearly a flawed process. What led to that flawed process? We're going to be learning a lot more here in the coming weeks and months.
Seth, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Becky.
Still to come, the Fed's latest language.